Hello students. Today we're going to learn about a very important strategy called surveying. So when we do a survey, the main point is we're trying to find motivation for our reading. It's very important when you go into reading, especially a textbook, that you don't just jump into it like whatever as you do with a novel, because a textbook has a lot of information, and if you read it as you do with a novel, you might get stuck because it doesn't just flow naturally, and it's, it might be organized differently. So a textbook has a lot of information, so there's an actual smart way to read it. And you first want to know what you're reading about. And so when we do survey, we're trying to get motivation for our reading. We're trying to develop a purpose. And so this is the first step we do. When you survey, you look at text features. And you're not going to be reading. You're just going to be looking at all the important features that make that text unique. You're not going to be reading it in depth. You're going to do sort of like a helicopter view from above and just looking at key things so you can kind of figure out how the text is organized, and you're just going to predict what you're going to expect to read. And when we do this, we read after that, and the reading is more engaging because you already know what to expect. You know where things are, and you're not surprised and intimidated by the reading. So here's the first thing we do. Let's look at the text features that we have here. So I look at the heading. So it tells me what chapter and what unit we're on. That's not too important, but I'm just looking at that. I know we're going to learn about the respiratory system, so this is the main title. So I'm going to learn about the respiratory system, and I know that has to do with breathing. Another thing, they're going to talk about some sort of introduction right here. I think all these readings have a think about it section, and even a little picture of an ambulance. So I'm guessing, my prediction is that they're going to be comparing this to an important situation where breathing is involved. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. But notice what I'm doing is I'm doing really two things. I'm going to be asking or developing questions that'll guide my reading and spur my interest to read this. And also I'm going to be making some predictions about what I'm about to read. When I do these things, make questions and make predictions, and then I start reading, then the reading is going to be funner because I'm going to be reading to basically answer my question. So I will be reading with a purpose. So let's keep doing that. Let's look at some more text features. I noticed that there's key questions on the side. So you know what? They already made the key questions for me. So this is really helpful. And there's 4 of them. And this guides your reading because really it tells you what's really important. So out of this whole reading, you really want to come out with 4 things. This is important for a reader because with a textbook, you can get overwhelmed and think that there's so much to read. You might think everything's important, but at the end of the day, if you focus back on these 4 questions, then that's really what is the most important thing about this reading. So stick to these 4 questions and you're going to be good. We're going to also come across certain vocabulary words. What I like to do is just see which ones I already know. And it seems that these are very new to me. I do know that the diaphragm is this muscle that helps us breathe, so I at least know one of them. And the other thing to note is that these are not all the vocabulary words. These are like some of the main ones, but there's going to be more. So there's going to be more than these. There's other things here, like I know I'm going to learn about the structures of the respiratory system. So this is what we call a subtitle. And what the subtitle basically tells us, one of the pieces of this respiratory system unit, one of the sections that we're going to learn. And we're going to learn about the structures and probably what they do. And notice we came to our first key question. What is the function of the respiratory system? And that was the question we had here, and we're actually going to answer it right here. So I know that I'm going to pay attention to this part because I get one of the main points of this whole reading right here. And I keep reading here, and I notice that we're going to learn about the nose right here. And let's turn to the other page. And also I'm going to learn about cilia here. And I always pay attention to the figures because they give me more details. They give me a visual so that I can understand the reading a little bit more. So this is figure 33-14. And we're going to learn about cilia. And I always like to read the caption. So let's label that caption. And so the caption just gives me a little bit more detail about the picture, which will help me understand the reading. I always want to pay attention to these. Pictures really give us a lot of information. Sometimes you get little hints about the vocabulary words that help you understand it. And these are a lot of text features that I didn't have when I was reading these back in college or even in high school. We didn't have all these great features, so you're very lucky these days. I'm going to learn about the pharynx, the larynx, and the trachea right here. I'm going to learn about the lungs right here. This quick lab stuff might not be important. We might do this in class, but it usually helps us understand the information by doing a little practice activity, but it really doesn't teach you anything new. So I'll just cross this out just for the moment. Don't focus on that. I go to the next page and I notice a diagram. Diagrams are super important in biology and science. They give you a lot of information, and visuals are really my favorite. I understand the information better in this way. It looks like we're going to be learning not only the structures, but based on this, from what I can see right here, air moves through the nose, pharynx, larynx, into the lungs. So I guess it's the passageway of how air gets into our body. So not only are we learning about a diagram, but we're always going to learn about some steps in science. Whenever you have a diagram, usually there's some steps. So you have all that here. So I'm just going to put a star here that when I get here, I'm going to pay close attention. And they actually zoom in. They always do zoom in things in science. We're going to zoom in to this structure here that we'll learn about. I guess it's called the alveoli. Notice I'm not really reading. I'm just getting an overview so that I can get an understanding of what I'm about to read. And I can keep doing this, and I can go further, and I can kind of already predict what I'm going to learn about. Now usually you don't want to take more than a minute when you do this. You just want to start looking at it. Again, look at the bold words, key features, and just make some predictions. Okay, I think I'm going to learn about this, or develop some questions of your own. You know, maybe here you might wonder, okay, what are they transporting? Are they transporting oxygen? So you might want to put a question mark, and when you get there you'll pay some close attention to that. So again, you do this however you feel comfortable with, but you always want to survey. So let's review what we just did. When we survey, we look at text features, and the main goal is what? We want to develop a purpose, a motivation for our reading. And we can do this by looking at the text features and developing questions, making predictions, even making connections to your life. We look at the bold words, we look at the titles, the subtitles, we look at key concepts or key questions. They might be also called objectives. You look at words in italic, you look at the vocabulary words, you pay attention to diagrams, charts, graphs, and especially those captions that tell you what those are about. Sometimes you look at the chapter questions at the end. So in general, you just look at all the text features and you look at it as from a helicopter view to try to make sense of the text, try to get an idea of what you're going to read about, and then you read. So you always want to survey first.